Believe it or not, this odyssey started 17 years ago. Lindsay Duran, the producer, came to me and said, hey, I have a book. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called 3 Bags Full, and it's a murder mystery. And I went, ooh. And she said, where sheep have to solve the murder of their shepherd. And I said, I'm in, I'll do it. And then begins a tale of Hollywood persistence. It was Lindsay Duran's determination, I think, above all, that got us to the place where I was able to work on the movie at all, because you have to get the rights to a book, and the rights were very complicated. And so it just took time. And I think a lot of producers would have given up, and Lindsay never did. I myself started to think, oh, this probably won't ever happen. But then 7 years later, it did. I've been asked a lot over the last, I guess it's like 6-7 years now. How did the guy that does those movies end up doing these TV shows? And I've never really been able to answer properly until now, and the answer is sheep, and I'm not joking. So writing this script was really the moment I think I became the writer that I am now. And again, we're talking about something that happened over 10 years ago, really, when I started. But the process of working with Lindsay Duran was really enlightening. First of all, I'm forever grateful to her that she had faith in me. I think she saw a writer in me that maybe had not yet emerged. And the way it worked was that I sort of outlined the story, and then I began to write, and I would send her 5 pages at a time. We would talk about those pages for hours. We would go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And that process was so rigorous and demanding and wonderful. And out of that, I started to find some confidence in telling a story that was as true to who I was and what I wanted to say about the human condition as possible. So it was incredibly honest. And through that process, I think I kind of started to become the writer that I feel I am now. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, but working on this movie, it was the sheep all along. You want to know? That was the answer. For real, it was the sheep. When people would ask me, what is this movie about? I would tell them, that's easy. A shepherd is murdered and his sheep want to solve the crime. But when they would ask me, okay, but what is it about? I would tell them it's a coming of age story. And that's what it is. It is a story about growing up. Now, what's interesting about sheep is that, at least as we present them, most of them already are grown up. There are little lambs, they're adorable, but most of the sheep are adults and they're voiced by adults. What's interesting about them is that as adults, they are still children. They're innocent. And they have to learn about things. And the things that they learn about along the path of growing up are difficult. They learn about mortality. They learn about grief. They learn about loss. They learn about the cost of the rejection that they deal out. They also learn a little bit about the cost of having to be in a flock all the time. All of these things are part of the growing up process. So the way you make this not message heavy is by making it about the characters and their relationships. There's no one message. If there is anything to take away from this, it's that the process the sheep go through is the process we've all gone through. Any of us who have grown up, and every kid who watches this is going to be able to go, I know the feeling of learning something that maybe I didn't want to know, or feeling something I didn't want to feel. But they went through it, I can go through it, we're going through it together. That's the story. It's not a message, it's just about growing up. There are different aspects of the story in terms of genre, because it is a comedy and it is a coming of age story and it is a murder mystery and a detective story. But tone is the thing that unites all the genres under one feeling. And the feeling that I wanted to impart was the feeling I had when I read the novel, and that was delight. Delight and love for the sheep. I wanted to feel for them. I wanted to feel their sweetness. The comedy comes from how sweet and confused they are. The beauty comes from how wise they are. The interesting parts of the detective story are because they're trying so hard because they love their shepherd so much. They love each other so much, even when they frustrate each other. And that's just, you just set a North Star and you try and stick to it. And as long as you stay honest to each character and to the feelings that gave birth to the whole thing in the first place, you shouldn't go wrong. You need someone who instantly projects a kind of calm worthiness. And Hugh Jackman is that guy. You don't have to spend a lot of time. The moment you see Hugh taking care of sheep, you think, I would like to be one of those sheep. I would like him to take care of me and be my shepherd. He's very capable and he's very kind and good. In the very first draft, when I described Tim, I described him as too tall and too thin. And many years later, Nicholas Braun is cast as Constable Tim, and I mean, just physically, it was perfect, but also his spirit is so sweet. His innocence. He's like the sheep, actually. He's a police officer who's never had to solve a crime. He lives in a town where there is no crime, and he's scared of crime, and he's not sure he could solve anything ever. He also has to grow up while the sheep are growing up. And Nicholas just was the perfect bit of casting for that. Nicholas Galitzine plays Elliot, and Elliot is sort of the opposite of Tim. Elliot is somebody that is so competent and has been unrecognized for his competence. He's supposed to be like a great reporter, but he's young, he's been overlooked. He's in this town for the silliest of reasons and then gets lucky that there's this case to work on. He has to convince the police officer to try and investigate it as a murder. And I always thought of that character as representing a little bit of my own frustration sometimes when I feel like people are all missing, like, you're all missing it, it's right here, look, look, look. And he had that intelligence in his eyes that you love to see of somebody who's like on it, you know? He is in many ways the counterpart to Lily, the detective sheep. It's like even though the police officer is, I guess, technically a detective, really Elliot, the reporter, is the one who's kind of working with Lily to actually solve the crime. I think about each one of those sheep as fulfilling a kind of function. Each function is an aspect of the larger group. And when you meet lots of characters in a group, you want to feel that individuality coming out of each one of them and stay consistent with it, but that means they need a drive, they need a function, a purpose. Zora is curious. Zora is defined by her curiosity. She needs to know all the time. I have a question, I have a question, I have a question. And Cloud is self-satisfied and quite assured of her own beauty, which I think is actually a lovely thing about sheep because they are beautiful. And each one of these characters had their own thing. And from that essence, I then asked, okay, well, what would they sound like? And what would they think in certain situations? Because each one of them is like paint on a palette. And as the scene goes on, I have a choice. In this moment, I could go to Cloud, I could go to Zora, I could go to Ronnie and Reggie, I could go to Mopple. Which one should I choose and why? And there always must be a reason. Casting the sheep was the big job. That's where you could really get things, you know, on track. And for Lily, it was really important that we had somebody that had a certain inherent authority as an adult while still feeling like they too were a child. So there's this kind of beautiful exuberance in Julia Louis-Dreyfus, a curiosity and a warmth. There is also maturity. She is an adult. There's no question about that. And she's incredibly competent and smart. You can feel that she could solve a crime. But also she has just this beautiful ability to acknowledge that when she doesn't know something, and she can be afraid, and she can be sad, and as a child would be. And so it was like finding somebody who is the most adult sheep who could also be the most childlike sheep at the same time, and yet have the intelligence and the drive that a great detective would have. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus is, she's not a legend for nothing. It was magic, just sitting there watching Lily happen. Sebastian, gruff, tough, a loner as far as sheep goes. And yet we have to understand that underneath that is this great, I'll use the term sheepmanity in him. He is enormously decent sheep. And we needed somebody to embody all of that, who would command tremendous authority over a flock he doesn't spend time with. Bryan Cranston has that ability to be both sides of the coin. He can be tough, and he can be authoritative, and he can be menacing, and also he can be incredibly decent and caring and loving. And Sebastian is a complicated character. We needed somebody who could do all of that, who would also be able to stop Lily in her tracks, because our understanding of Lily is she's kind of the head sheep. And then here comes this guy who's like, I don't care about that. My hope is that families, or people on their own of any age, walk out feeling a little bit more and thinking a little bit more about the people they love, the people that are still here and the people who are gone, and who think and feel a little bit more about how to include people and what the costs of exclusion are. In the end, this story about sheep is probably the most human story I've ever written. And it's for everyone. Everyone. I cannot think of any kind of person that this isn't for. This movie wears its heart on its sleeve. And it is a chance for everyone to put aside all the things that maybe we argue over or disagree about or can't stand about each other, and sit together and enjoy something that we actually all love, which in this case is crime-solving sheep.
It was very important that the sheep could absolutely live in the real world. They needed to be indistinguishably photoreal. So at the very beginning of the movie, you have lots of shots of sheep just being sheep, and it should be completely believable to an audience that they're real sheep in the real world. And then you have a wonderful moment at the beginning of the movie where you suddenly switch and you're with these sheep that are then talking and then also need to be believably talking. So it was a tough balance to find. The sheep are absolutely based on real sheep. So all the sheep were cast from sheep that were in various different locations. We visited a bunch of different places. Or Graham Page, the overall visual effects supervisor, had been through a long selection process. And then these sheep were scanned with clear angle, and so they became the basis of our sheep assets. And then we would work to try and find that balance between real sheep and Hollywood sheep to get where we've gotten to today. A sheep is kind of unique in many ways. Until you start really looking at a fleece and seeing how it's actually made, it's the tiniest hairs twisted up millions and millions of times over. And to approximate that in a 3D system is actually very, very difficult. And we had to come up with some different ways to do that so it would even render. And so that was an interesting challenge because the believability of fleece was obviously very, very important to this project. We'll take the model of our photoreal sheep and then we'll track the stuffy. So basically do like an animated match move of the stuffy with the real sheep, so that you've got a basis for animation to then go forward and add all the actual performance aspect of the sheep in the arms of a human character. So we have several shots where Winterlamb in particular is held by an actor or an actress, which I'd say they're probably the most challenging shots in the film to be 100% believable. And it's down to a lot of work with So animation working in hand with the compositing team just to really finesse a shot so that it is absolutely believable. Getting all those contact shadows perfect, getting the movement of the sheep to mirror any kind of movements and stuff in the arm of the performer as well. Just absolutely delighted with the way that our assets have come out in this show. I mean, we've put an absolute ton of work into the realism, some groundbreaking groom work to bring Lily in particular to life. And I think it shows in the performances. The face rigs are second to none. The animation team have got all the ranges they need. And I think the show's going to be wonderful because we put all that work in the front end. And yeah, I'm incredibly proud of what the team have delivered.
It's an interesting film from a visual effects perspective because it's probably got less than 1,000 shots, and a big Hollywood blockbuster might have up to 3,000 shots, so almost every single shot in the film be visual effects, whereas the approach for this film was always to capture real environments, real locations, real actors and performances. So we don't have any blue screen environments on this film. We don't have any LED volumes. We've got almost like traditional filmmaking, set builds and location photography, but then putting our CG characters in. So there's a sort of not necessarily an abundance of visual effects of the film, but where there is a lot of visual effects is in bringing the characters to life. My role as visual effects supervisor entails looking over the whole visual effects process of the film, from preparation, shoot, through to post. We talked about the approach for how we were going to make the film, and we started talking about the different characters, and we started talking about all the different traits of the sheep. And I started going to different farms around the UK. So I visited, I started looking at rare breeds farms, and started looking at different breeds that could become different sheep, and different breeds which had different characteristics that conveyed something that was unique to their characters. The approach that we brought to bringing these characters to life was to really try and take a naturalistic approach to the animation, and that involved really doing a lot of research in terms of looking at real sheep as reference and how they move. We spent many days at the same farm where we did the scanning of the sheep. We also did extensive shooting of live action references of real sheep, putting them through their paces of all the different kind of actions of the sheep what we needed the sheep to do in the film. I hope the audiences will really connect with the characters in this film and enjoy the humour and really get some kind of emotional connection. I'm really proud of some of the scenes where the winter lamb provokes such an emotional response from an audience. And I'm really proud of some of the work where you really feel an emotional connection to the characters.
It's been a bit of a evolution, a process to kind of find the right balance between, you want it to be a realistic sheep that you believe you could see anywhere, but at the same time, of course, it has to speak and talk. So one of the analogies we sort of used was we wanted all the kind of body mechanics and the motion to be exactly like a real sheep. So we use tons of reference that we shot of sheep. But then when it comes to anytime they're speaking or acting, it would almost be like if you could put on a special pair of glasses and it would just kind of translate what you're seeing from sort of like the sheep anatomy of the mouth moving and the eyebrows and the eyes to what you would, if you were a sheep, what it would look like to you as a human to human. So more expressive. Obviously, you can see the mouth moving and doing the talking. And that was kind of a good starting point for all of our acting and emotion. My team is responsible for basically anything that is movement-based for the sheep. So anytime you see a sheep, it's basically us that's making the character move, making the character talk, act, emote, speak, lip sync, all the motion for the for the animated sheep. Just being as realistic as possible so that we never really stop thinking of them as sheep. There can be, an uncanny valley in animation, if you will, where it can start to feel like an animated sheep versus you knowing it's a real sheep. So we always wanted to make sure, there was a real sheep first, all the motion came from a real sheep, and then we sort of translate that to the human emotions. Typically, we'll have a puppet pass, we call it, where a puppeteer on set has a, to scale size, at least head of, say, Lily, or maybe more. And in the case of true interaction of like petting her, then we would have the puppeteer would, mock that action up so that the actor has something actually physically to act to. Sometimes the puppet's removed, sometimes the puppet is actually used, and we put the CG sheep on top of it. That tends to give the most accurate and like true, interaction versus having to imagine too much what's there. Another thing we do is, typical to visual effects is eye lines, having things to denote where the character is. So if Mopple's running through the Partridge Inn, we've got someone running through to give the actors an idea of where to look. So it's a lot of just checking the relationship between the two characters is feeling right in the frame when you're animating it. You have to be super noodly, particularly with the eye lines, is the one thing that you can't pay too much attention to because the audience is always looking, of course, you hope, at the eyes of the characters, whether it's the human character or the sheep character. So if you get that right, then the rest kind of will hopefully fall into place. But if that part's wrong, it doesn't matter how good the rest of it is.
When I first read the script from Craig, it was incredible just how quickly it flowed. Of all the scripts I've ever read, it's probably the easiest read I've ever had. It just moved right through. Craig, of course, is an incredible writer. He can cover everything, and so this is one of his scripts that I know he's loved the most in his whole career, and it shows. The process of making a movie like this, you shoot several versions when you're actually on set. You shoot a version which has something called a stuffy, which is a stand-in basically for the animated character that you're going to bring in later. And it is appropriately named. It's usually a large stuffed animal. Sometimes it will have articulation. Sometimes actually you use a puppet with a puppeteer who is doing his own performance on set as well. That will inform our work. But that kind of thing is really helpful to have for an actor because not only does it give them a good eye line of where exactly they're supposed to be looking in a scene, it gives you so much more to work off of than just looking at a tennis ball or nothing at all. So we do a couple rehearsal passes where the actor has this stand-in to get their emotion, get their eye lines, get their performance all locked in. And then after that, we'll do a pass where we just take it out and they have to remember what they did in their take. And Hugh Jackman is one of the best I've ever seen when it comes to this. He remembers every single small movement and acting choice that he had in the puppet pass when we take it away. It's really kind of incredible to see just how exactly he lands his performance while looking at nothing at all. So visually, the voice actors don't really show up in the designs of the sheep, but they really drive the performance. So when we record the voice actors, we always have several cameras pointed at their face so that we can capture the intricacies of their performance. And then the animators frequently reference that footage to make sure that little micro expressions, I mean, everything from the smallest eyebrow twitch to big head turns and swivels are brought from the performance of the voice actor into the sheep that ends up on screen. And sometimes if we find that the performance isn't landing just right in the animation, we look back at the footage that was shot of the voice actors like, oh, of course, they did it right there, perfect. And that's a lot of fun as well, bringing what sometimes is a broad performance and sometimes a really, really specific performance, but moving that into a sheep's face who is also on all fours and doesn't quite have the articulation that a human has. It's the fun and challenge of bringing these characters to life. So the challenges in bringing the sheep to life in this movie really boil down to you want to honor what makes a sheep feel like a real sheep, but you need to get a performance out of them. Sheep don't have as many facial muscles as humans have, and so getting the right emotions out of them can be tricky, but that's also the fun of it. Any animator really gets into it because they love driving performance and finding real performance that connects with the audience. And so keeping these sheep feeling like real life sheep that just have just the right amount of push to get a human emotion out of them. That's the constant excitement and fun of the project, is finding what that really feels like. It's a murder mystery, so obviously there's some dark themes there. The movie tackles things like death and moving on and really kind of heady stuff, but it also tackles things like friendship, and it runs a gamut that is not condescending, and I think that's what makes it really, really land with both kids and adults. It doesn't shave the edges off to make it too easy. I hope when audiences watch this film, they take away, one, that they had a fun time, but more importantly, I hope they take away the importance of their memories, their loved ones, and how important all these things are when it comes to shaping ourselves and being the people that we want to be. But one of the most important themes in this movie is acceptance as well. There is a character in this movie, the Winter Lamb, who is disrespected and shunned just because he happened to be born in winter, which is a nonsensical reason to hate someone. And so that's what I really hope that audiences take away from this movie, is inspecting their own biases, inspecting their own feelings toward their fellow person, and hopefully brightening up that part of them. The theater experience for me is so important because in a comedy, everything is funnier when you're laughing along with the people beside you. There's a communal experience that you have on a movie like this where you're feeling the things that the people around you are feeling, and it just amplifies it so much. I can look back on all my favorite movies that I saw growing up where I didn't have the opportunity to watch them at home in a dark room by myself. You had to go to the theater if you wanted to see the latest movie, and experiencing those films with an audience amplified every part of the experience. Laughter, tears, sadness, emotions, all those things are amplified when you're sharing that with an audience together, and I just think it makes it so much more special.
The role of a production designer is to create the world that the script inhabits. So once I read the script, I start to come up with my visual side of my brain is reading the script visually. So those first couple of passes of the script, I write down my immediate initial ideas and thoughts, because on the whole, they'll come back, or they're what everyone else is sort of feeling as well. And then talking with the director and producer, Lindsay and Kyle, it's very important to find what their objective is, what their reasoning for the story is, because I'm there, or I like to think I'm their eyes, I'm their creator of the world. So, and they're, Carl's the director, so it's about finding what his view is and me trying to inhabit that with the spaces that I create. And there's many different ways to make a movie, and like I said earlier, this is interesting because I've not made a movie with this mashup of live action and animated sheep. Kyle comes from the animation background, but he's absolutely perfect for the live side, the live action. And the fact that he comes from that animation is that his visual style, he knows exactly what he wants. So his process, like the whole film has been prevised, whether sophisticated, or just with little hand drawings. So when we're talking about how to achieve certain scenes, Kyle's brilliant because he can just scribble very quickly what his intention is, and that visual language is my language. It's been interesting because I think as a designer, I want to fill the space, and it's really important, even in a traditional film, to leave space for the actors, for them to inhabit the world. So the fact we would be leaving space for the sheep was quite interesting. So a lot of the design is very detailed, low down. I knew we were going to see floors and textures and carpets, and we were going to be seeing a lot of this movie from the sheep's point of view. So that was fascinating to have more of perhaps an understanding or an importance of low down design as well as the ceilings. Creating the farm was exciting because we basically grew 10 acres of grass. We, bought that airstream, gutted it, and we built the barn from scratch. So that was fun creating that environment. But then the Partridge Inn is a dream for a designer to create. We, between Kyle and Lindsay and myself, decided this was an inn that we wanted everyone who walked in to want to stay, to know, where is this? We want to go. So it was fun playing with the colours and the palettes and the textures in that environment. We wanted George's character to live in this effortlessly stylish airstream. He's not homeless. This is a choice he's made to live up there. And again, we wanted that feel so that if anyone was to turn up, they go, oh my God, I could live here. This is gorgeous. And we found the most beautiful landscape in the Chilterns, and being able to organise with a fantastic location team to get that airstream up there and to dress it as we did was brilliant and fascinating. And we wanted the whole film to have this sort of international cosmopolitan vibe. So we pushed the sort of like Americana in particular up there, the sort of Ralph Lauren vibe to that airstream. We could do a photo shoot there, hopefully. It's been one of those projects where we've all, I think, had the same end goal. So there's been a really supportive, collaborative nature. And Carl and Lindsay are very clear on what they want and are supportive in, I think, all departments in achieving that.
I will obviously start off with mood boards, which I will discuss with the director and the producer. And then once that's kind of been established and we're all happy with it, I will go on to a process of drawing it out or getting a costume illustrator to do a very realistic version, depending on the director and how they translate things. In this case, I got a costume illustrator to illustrate it in a very realistic way so that Carl could really visualize it. And then once all that's been established and Carl's happy and Lindsay's happy, then we present it to the actor. I talk through my ideas and why I visualize the clothes they're wearing and why I feel that it's their character. And then we kind of take it from there. When I read the scripts, the thing that I really loved about it was the fact that you could create, it was a sort of a made-up world, a village with made-up world of these talking sheep. So I thought there was a lot of opportunity to really create something interesting and quirky and unique because there's talking sheep. What can I say? Obviously, he's a farmer, so we needed to convey that. But I didn't want him to be just your bog standard farmer. I wanted him to have I wanted him to be charming. I wanted him to be attractive and good looking and, well, which he obviously is. But I kind of wanted to enhance that. And also, I wanted it to be a bit timeless. Also, a lot of natural fibers because he's sheep and he's all kind of, he's a good man and all that. So I kind of wanted him to have natural fibers. So he has a lot of like linens and heavy drill cottons. And so all his fabric is kind of very organic and wholesome. And that was very important. And then, but I also wanted to bring some coloring. I want, every character in this, I wanted some color. And I definitely brought in color with him in terms of his shirts. So he's got little pops of color on his shirt. So because his trousers are kind of brown and his jacket's a bit brown, but then you've got pop of red or blue or, and that was very important to me. And then, he wears Henley tops, which again are very practical, but actually they're totally timeless. They've been made since the 1920s in different fabrics and stuff. And I really wanted that to be in there. But when you look at him, it's kind of quite classic. It's, timeless classic. She's not from the village. So I kind of wanted her to look really sharp, but I also wanted her to slightly look not scary, but really when she arrives and you first see it, to have a real presence. For me, I wanted to have shape. I love the idea of shape and structure because that sort of indicates power. So I had inspiration from Terry Mugler's and Gaultier and all these 90s kind of amazing designers. And I got influences from that, and then kind of my own world where I wanted, when you saw her, if you saw her in a silhouette, you would just see this amazing shape. It's like, so that's why all the suits are really fitted and sharp and structured. And then also I wanted really strong colors. With everybody, I bring in pops of color because color to me is really important. So we've got the purple when she first arrives because that's really imposing and strong, and and then it slightly softens with the orange and then softens even more with the pink. So you at first you're slightly scared of her, and then you kind of soften to her and you actually like her towards the end because she's not scary. But every suit needed to look sharp and structured. We decided we're going to base it on truth. And so we got everything made because obviously Nicholas is very tall. And so we just made a uniform. What I changed slightly is his shirts are a stronger blue to the normal police shirts, because again, I wanted the blue to stand out a bit more. So we did that. And and the cuts are a little bit more timeless again. So they're not full on now. Policemen now wear Gorex and fabrics that are kind of not very natural. So I've kind of gone for a slightly older kind of style. We decided that he might have thought, well, I'm going to the countryside, so I'm going to have a bit of tweed. So we thought a nice way to do this would be to give him a bomber jacket in tweed because it's still young and it's also quite cool. And yet it's kind of almost an element of him thinking, oh yeah, that's what people wear in the countryside. They wear tweed. So the tie was my little thing. I love the idea of, because he's South African, he's meant to be South African. I really like the idea of bringing in that color because it's in the South African flag. And so we brought that color in. The fact that it's knitted, it's quite nice because it just makes it a little bit more interesting from just a normal tie. He could have had just a normal tie, but the fact that it's a knitted tie just makes it a little bit off-piste. But, apart from that, everything he wears is kind of what a young person could wear if they were dressing to impress.
I was in my car driving across town to go watch the film for the first time. And honestly, that's what attracted me to it. I barely had time to even think about what the movie was about or what the themes were. I just sat down in the theater at Amazon's offices and watched this really sweet, delightful, and honestly pretty compelling in terms of a murder mystery story film unspool before my eyes. And I knew, before it was even a quarter of the way into the movie, that this was a film that not only was I really interested in being a part of, but also was right up my alley. I began this score by thinking about which characters needed to have signature sounds or signature melodies, themes that represent the characters. For example, I have a theme for George, the shepherd, and I have a theme for Lily, the sheep that we spend the most time with. And I have a theme for the flock, which also serves as a kind of a family theme. These are short or longer melodies that I can reuse as the score progresses. And what's great about working this way is we have these signposts that we can use to help the audience make associations between the music and the story that they're seeing on the screen. And this can help build emotional connections to the characters as well. And if I do my job right, a theme for a character can in one scene be played very joyously and in the very next scene be played sadly. And this creates a tapestry that hangs together as a whole, as well as being able to support each scene or each moment in each scene as individual moments more fully. We've been here all week working with this orchestra to record music that I've spent the last couple of months crafting and preparing, and then taking that music and putting the notes on the page that you see on the music stands behind me so that the musicians can sit down and actually play the music that we've been putting together. And over there off camera is a control room where the recording engineer and all of us work to actually, as they play the music, we record it. I get to do my work mixing it, and then it gets delivered to the final movie where it gets mixed in with the dialogue and the sound effects, and it creates the whole soundtrack for the film. We wanted to create a score that was heartfelt and emotional and, mainly speaking, somewhat traditional. We have big melodies, it's played by a big string section, and you get that sort of classic film score sound, but we didn't want it to only be that. We also wanted to have some elements that were unique, that might be very special for this score that you maybe wouldn't have heard in another film. So there's a recurring combination of instruments that, after a little bit of experimentation, we came up with, which specifically is a piano, but with my hand over the strings of the piano. So instead of going bong, it goes thunk. And I combine that with a solo viola usually, although sometimes when it gets a little bit higher in range, it'll be violin, or lower, it'll be cello. But it's basically a viola, and let's call it a thunk piano combination that gives it a very unique character. It's a little quirky, and it also is, to me anyway, a little bit folky. It's a little bit homemade, and I think that really supports the idea that we have a bunch of animals on a farm. It's very grounded. It's very of the earth, and I think having that sort of like almost broken instrument being played on a porch feel supports that very well. The very end of the film is a particular challenge because there's so much we want to cover in a relatively short amount of time, and it was challenging to find a way to make sure that we honor all the different moments that we're showing in the story, all the different characters and their journeys, and finding that balance between honoring and signifying each of those moments in a 2 or 3 minute scene that ends the movie, and just playing a piece of music that embodies those feelings of family, love, and acceptance that we've been talking about. But ultimately, that piece too is a great example of my favorite type of music to write, which is music that has beauty, heart, love, and that can really touch people on a deep emotional level.
The story of this book is about a shepherd named George who reads aloud at night at the end of a hard day. Apparently shepherds all over the world do this. They know their sheep can't hear them, but it's just a nice way to end the day, to sit on the deck and read aloud. And what this shepherd is reading aloud every single night is murder mysteries. Again, it never occurs to him that the sheep can understand him, let alone that they're following the mystery and trying to figure out who done it. So when he's murdered, the sheep think they know everything about how to solve a murder. And they find out very quickly that the local cop, just like the local cops in the murder mysteries, don't understand anything about how to solve a murder. And so they realize they're going to have to do it themselves. They have a very limited idea of the human world. Everything they know about the human world is only from the books that they've heard. But Lily, the kind of leader of the sheep, has always been so good at solving these murder mysteries way before they end that she honestly thinks that in less than 24 hours she can solve this mystery. But it means leaving the meadow, which they've never done before. It's terrifying to them to think about leaving leaving the meadow. They've never been in a town before. They've never seen so many real people before. And it turns out, as one of them has predicted, that the real world is a lot different from a book, and it's going to be a lot harder to solve the mystery than they thought. At the beginning, we talked a lot about tone. That was a big discussion, was exactly where was the comedy of this movie? How broad was it going to be? How sophisticated was it going to be? How do you make something? Someone said to me, a family audience, a family movie now is a movie for adults to which children are welcome to come. And I think that's right. There used to be these things called drop-off movies where parents would just drop off the child and then either go see a different movie or go have coffee or something until it was over. Now you want everybody in the theater. You want everybody to be engaged at the same time. And I think Craig did a great job of figuring out how to write a script that was really entertaining for adults and could go into very deep emotional themes and never leave the children behind, never condescend to the children, but not use kind of snappy contemporary dialogue as if they're all in a modern sitcom. There's none of that in this movie. So it was really wonderful to watch him work out these characters, work out the human characters, work out the sheep characters. We also decided early on that this was a movie that wasn't going to be set particularly in England, even though we were shooting it in England and most of our cast was English. So you'll notice that the police officer uniforms aren't really the English police officer uniforms, and the police cars aren't really the police cars. There's a postal woman, and she isn't wearing the exact right uniform that she would be wearing. So we've kind of evened out the language a little bit, so it isn't quite as English as it might have been if we just said this is a story set in England. We never hear the word London. We never hear the word England. So it was a sort of set everywhere, even though everybody has an English accent, except the one American character. So that was something that we talked about a lot. And it came up in things like production design, in things like costumes. The costumes could be American, they could be English, they could be somewhere else. The same with the production design wasn't specifically English. It was more of a universal feel. When we tried to figure out how many people could play this part, we came down to one name, which was Hugh Jackman. We thought, what are we going to do if he doesn't want to play the part? And he said yes on page 11. He loved it so much, he understood it so completely, so fast, that he literally called and said yes before he'd even finished the screenplay. And he's exactly what we had wanted. You watch him on that farm and you say, yep, I completely believe that this man is a shepherd, that he loves his sheep, that he relates to his sheep more than he relates to anybody else, that he loves reading murder mysteries. And his presence through the whole movie, there's some flashbacks, so he doesn't just die, in the first act and then never come back again. There are flashbacks that show him, but his presence carries through the whole movie because that's the kind of actor that he is. That's the kind of charisma that he has, that he can dominate the movie even though he's only physically in the movie for a short amount of time. It's really important. It's very difficult to kill off your movie star at the very beginning of a movie and feel his presence all the way through. You have to have that solid performance and that perfect actor in that part to make the whole story work. I think I've produced 5 movies with Emma Thompson now, and in every single one she plays a completely different character. I never really know who she's going to be when she shows up. Even when she wrote the scripts, I wasn't really sure how she would play the part. She's always funny. It doesn't matter what she's playing. She figures out a way to how to be funny in it, and that's exactly what we needed for Harbottle, of somebody who could be really, really entertaining to an audience and very, very scary to the police officer, to some of the other characters who interact with her. She doesn't care how rude she is, and yet she's a really enjoyable character. At our previews, when we've done previews of the movie, we've noticed how many people say she's one of their very favorite characters because she's so entertaining and so unexpected as a lawyer whose role in the movie is to be the shepherd's lawyer who has to come to town and read the will. It's a very classic Agatha Christie kind of situation, but she just brings a lot of authority to it and a lot of humor. She's very funny, and And this character, Tim, that he plays, Officer Tim, has a real arc. He starts out, George, the shepherd, identifies him as an idiot. He looks like an idiot. Everybody treats him as an idiot. Nobody has any respect for him whatsoever. And yet he grows into a real cop, into a real detective over the course of the story with the help of the sheep, which is very confusing to him. And we just loved him. He did an English accent, which was so convincing that a lot of the people in the crew went, I didn't know that Nicholas Braun was English, because he just convinced them that he was English. But it seemed, again, he has a good English face that seemed to work for the movie. So, and he was a complete delight to work with. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is great at playing the ultimate sheep detective. There's a lot of funny dialogue for Lily that Julia Louis-Dreyfus was the perfect one to play. She was one of the first people I thought of. Actually, I listened to her podcast, and so I'm very used to hearing just her voice. And that voice was in my head for a really long time for this character. And it was someone that Craig Mazin specifically loved for this character. So she gave us every inch of humor that this character had. But when it gets really emotional, she gave us all of that. When Lily has to realize that she's been a show-off and she's been really proud of herself and she thought that she could solve this mystery in 24 hours and it turns out that simply isn't true. She has to go through a really dark night of the soul over the course of this movie. And she gave us all of that. I know for a lot of people, it's rare to work on a movie that's a mixture of laugh-out-loud comedy and emotional drama, but for me, that's all I want to do. There are very few movies that I've produced that are not both really, really funny and really, really emotional. To me, that is what a movie has the opportunity to give you. Audiences are so grateful when you give them the whole thing. They're so grateful to be watching an emotional drama that also makes them laugh. They're so grateful to be watching a laugh-out-loud comedy that makes them cry. If you can see a movie that makes you laugh and makes you cry and makes you think, to me, that is the full gamut of what a movie can do. And that's what this movie does, I think, in spades. I've seen it now with preview audiences. They laugh and laugh and laugh. They identify it as a comedy, and yet they cry and cry and cry, sometimes from sadness, sometimes from happiness. It's the full range of entertainment, and I think that's what we owe them. Figuring out how to work with the wonderful people at Frame Store, specifically Graham Page, to make these sheep as real as they could possibly be, but not so real that you don't feel the human emotions coming through, you don't feel the human humor coming through. So it's remarkable now that the sheep are beginning to be finished. It's just remarkable. You say, how can that face be a real sheep face and yet have emotions that are so subtle, or indications of something that are so subtle? Somebody saying something to somebody almost without looking at them, sort of, Lily shows off a lot. She's a real show-off, and at the beginning she's a real show-off, and then in the middle of the movie she begins to realize she doesn't know as much as she thought she did. There's incredibly detailed and subtle versions of her expressions and Sebastian's expressions and Moppel's expressions as they go through the eventual, all of the emotions of this movie. And it's all there in the sheep faces. When people watch The Sheep Detectives, I hope they take away that they had a wonderful time, that they laughed, that they cried, that it gave them things to think about, that the drama didn't get in the way of the comedy and the comedy didn't get in the way of the drama, that they've had a full experience at the movies that wasn't just laughter, wasn't just tears, wasn't just drama, but that it was everything that you can have from a movie. That's what we set out to do, and I hope that that's what people get.
My role as the makeup and hair designer is to kind of create the looks for the live action part of the film. And that means reading the script, collaborating with Kyle and Lindsay on kind of what they see the whole vision as. And then as the cast comes in, then we kind of, work together to create a look for them. The whole idea for the look of this was to keep it as real as possible, because, you know, we do have talking sheep, and that's kind of a real stretch of the imagination. But just to have them look real and human and relatable. So it wasn't anything kind of like fantastical. It was just a real kind of like a grounding kind of process, because at some point you kind of think yourself, well, if the sheep are talking, you could probably have this crazy hair, or you could try this or do that. And you think, no, it all has to be very, very level. And so when we go into the talking sheep world, then, you know, the audience kind of buys into that. The idea behind Lydia Harbottle's, played by Emma Thompson's look was, for me, I said to Emma, could it be that she was a bit of a punk in her day, and she went to, you know, the Polytechnic and got herself, you know, a degree, and then she went into university. So she's got a little bit of an edge to her, hence that kind of edgy haircut. And but again, you know, she's quite ambitious. I think the biggest thing was also the haircut, is to get that kind of edgy haircut, because it's got a little bit of an 80s edge to it, in terms of that kind of, you know, short sort of back and sides with a little bit, you know, kind of heavier on top. So it was having that. And again, her makeup was, you know, very natural, you know, because she, again, doesn't want to necessarily show that she's spending a lot of time doing a lot of makeup, but she gets a decent haircut, you know, once every couple of weeks or every 6 weeks or something, and then it remains like that, because she's a businesswoman, so she doesn't want anything that she has to spend a lot of time on and put a lot of effort into. So basically, yeah, and she stays true to her roots. He decides how he wants to look, and, you know, whether he wants to look like a regular policeman that we see every day, or he can like have his hair just, and we kind of went through a few ideas, whether his hair was just a little bit grown out and a little bit longer. And then we kind of then decided that no, Nicholas decided he's wanted to be a policeman for a long time, and he wanted to look like a straight policeman, especially when Lydia Harbottle arrives. He needs to pull himself up, you know, so he starts off as a little bit soft around the edges, and then by the time he's with Lydia and they're talking about, you know, they're kind of solving the mystery, then he wants to kind of pull his look together. So then, you know, the whole hairdressing, it's not just about the dressing and the parting, and does the parting go higher, does it go lower, does it, you know, whatever, but it's just to kind of show a change in how he presents himself once he has, I guess, someone looking over his shoulder. Collaboration with Carl, the director, is key, because ultimately they have had this world for the longest while in their heads. They've been working on it. They've been with the production designer. They've been on all the records. They've seen the locations. They've seen all of that. So really, it's just to kind of try and harvest information from them to then create what I think would fit into the world, and then kind of present it. We collaborate very, very closely. And as we progress and the actors come in, then we go back to the drawing board and think, well, this is what they're thinking, and this is where we see this going, you know, how are we feeling here? So, you know, the creative team is usually quite tight. We have to be, just to kind of create a believable world, especially a world like Denbrook, where the sheep are talking. You know, we have to make sure we keep it grounded. I hope it be a legacy movie. If I'm ever a grandmother one day, I can force my grandchildren to watch it. So look at this, I did that. and yeah, just, you know, being a part of something which is entertaining. It's entertainment. It's not a message, even though it does have messages in it, great messages, but we're not kind of beating anyone over the head. You know, it's just great to be a part of something that will be entertaining and funny. And yeah, I hope it will be really great.
Lindsay Duran, who is our guru and spirit guide through the movie business, has been working on this project for just about as long as we've known her. And Every time we would go into her office with big problems on one of our movies, she would say, I just came out of the most delightful conversation with Craig Mazin about the most beautiful movie, about these most beautiful sheep. And she had these stars in her eyes. And we would say, well, we're about to ruin your day with our own problems. So it's nice to be able to get to work on something that only brings joy to Lindsay's face.
It's true. Both Lindsay Duran and Craig Mazin are good friends of ours, and the fact that they were working on something together on a concept that was so delightful made us have to worm our way into it. We're big fans of murder mysteries, especially a fair play murder mystery where you can solve it if you pay enough attention, and this is a well-crafted, really nicely executed murder mystery.
I like movies where the character's ambition exceeds their ability.
It's true, and these sheep, they don't know how to do lots of stuff, and it's quite charming.
It's so darling, and it's easy to think that it's cute and sweet, but it is also unbelievably intelligent and sophisticated, and surprising. And it doesn't talk down to kids or families. It presumes their intelligence. I think correctly so.
It was many years ago that Lindsay convinced us that, you can be sincere sometimes and actually lean into the emotional story, and people will laugh at the jokes more. And our minds were blown, and we've been believers and followers of that ever since. And
Yes.
so the fact that this matches our sensibility is no coincidence. But we'd love to make movies that are actually about something. And have deeper themes that resonate with people of any age. And this movie has, a lot of sophisticated, adult ideas in it that I think can be profoundly moving for people. And when we read the script, we were really, impressed at how deep it went. And I think that was really something that made us really attracted to the project.
Kyle's somebody whose work we've admired for a long time, and on this project we've gotten to admire his commitment and preparation and willingness to do whatever it takes to be the director that this movie needs.
I think why this movie everyone will fall in love with it is because their themes are universal. It's not talking down or seeming like it's just for kids, like mindless entertainment. It's smart, it's clever. The concept is really memorable. The themes are sophisticated, and it's super duper funny. So it's got something for everyone.
And sheep are cute.
There's that too.
Carl is great. He obviously comes from things from a slightly different way, coming from the animation world, but he's incredibly well organised. And we've actually storyboarded this entire film and watched this entire film in the cinema before we actually shot anything at all, which is quite unusual in many, many ways. But it now means that we know exactly what we're doing all the way through. So it's brilliant. It's a very good script indeed. It is poignant, it's funny, it's emotional. It's all the things you wouldn't necessarily expect from Digital Sheep, but it's actually a very good script. It goes along at a good rate. It's very well written. One of my favourite scripts for a long time. Lindsay's great. I mean, she is one of the great pillars of the film production world and has been on so many films of amazing note. Her sort of skills in the script is extraordinary. I mean, her sort of attention to detail of how everything runs within the script is legendary, and she has shown it again on this. Susie's design, I worked with Susie on Saltburn, and delighted to work with her again on this. She has amazing touches and puts a lot of humour into everything and does everything that bit differently. Sorry, she does everything that bit differently, which is brilliant. The colour she's brought to all of this, the pops, the neon signs dotted all over the place. It's been quite an interesting collaboration with everybody, because obviously costume and art department need to all be on the same page with what they're doing. You have to do a lot more planning, because you have to know how many shots in the movie are going to be digital characters, because the shots are very, very expensive. And so if you get that wrong, you can go off budget very, very quickly. So it takes a lot of planning on everyone's part to begin with. It then takes everyone working together to sort of do all those key sort of storyboarding and planning. And there's very much on this as well. As I said before, we have storyboarded this entire movie, so we know exactly how many shots of sheep are in this movie, how many sheep there are, how many flock sheep there are, because it's quite a different cost if there's one sheep and if there's 30 sheep. So we have to know exactly what all those shots are, what they're all doing. Are they, running? Are they dancing? Actually, they don't dance, but if they did, then we would need to know. The question always is who done it, and I think that's why people love these films, is because people like to be keeping guessing to the very end. And in this film, you certainly do. It's very, very, very few people, I think one who's ever guessed who actually did it in this particular film, which is the way it should be. And of course, as soon as you do know who did it, you go, of course.